All right, folks. Again, nice to see everybody here in 3Zen. This morning, share a story about a couple experiences I had in Southeast Asia when I was flying rescue C-130s in the 56 ARRS, Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service. I was stationed there from December 1973 to December 1974. So I get into Korat, Thailand, and a couple days later, my roommate for the year showed up, Alan Kibberts, and we formed a friendship and a relationship that is just as valuable today as it was back in the time there. So Alan had this navigator on his crew. We were part of an experiment with hard crews. Military Airlift Command, MAC, was going through this idea of creating firm crews like Strategic Air Command and so forth. But in the transport world, it just didn't work. But we had to let them try it out to see it for themselves. It wouldn't work. So anyway, so we get these hard crews, and Alan had this navigator assigned to him that was perpetually late. The guy just could not make appointed report times. All right. One of the duties we had at that time was alert, and we had an alert commitment, and we had two planes on alert, a primary and a secondary. King 2-1 and King 2-2 were the call signs, respectively. So we would meet at 9 o'clock for a 9:30 transition with the off-going crew. And during that time, we'd go over to Fort Apache, the intel shop. We'd get our briefed on the intelligence, anything on the horizon, anything of interest, and so forth. You go to the weather shop, get a briefing on the weather, and then go to the armory, pick up our weapons. We carry these 38s, combat masterpieces. And then we go meet the off-going crew at the airplane and do the switch or store our gear on the airplanes and so forth. Well, Buck, the navigator, was always late, 10, 15 minutes late. And he didn't see where it was a big deal. And Alan, it just drove Alan nuts. Now, Alan's very easygoing. And he let him slide a lot. But anyway, so he would talk to me about it and express his frustrations. I did not have the patience that Alan had. I didn't tolerate buffoonery very well. But anyway, so this one day we're up flying around, and we had this mission. It was a local mission, if you will, training mission. I had a couple of new co-pilots. I was an instructor, so I was giving them some touch and goes and an orientation to some of the other airfields around Thailand that we frequently went to. So we were going into Utapao. And we get down to Utapao, and we decided we'll take 45 minutes to an hour, go have lunch. Okay, fine. So we land, and I get the crew together. I said, all right, we're going to start engines at 1 o'clock. And I looked over at Buck. I said, okay, what time are we starting engines? He says, 1 o'clock. Okay, and you got it, right? 1 o'clock. He said, well, you don't have to be a jerk about it. And I said, okay, as long as you understand, I'm good. So some of us went and got lunch. Some went to the jewelry stores and who knows wherever else. 1 o'clock shows up, no Buck. Okay, so I looked over at the co-pilot and I said, engine start checklist. And somebody said, sir, we don't have the navigator. I said, Roger, engine start checklist. So we fire up the engines, take one quick look around, no Buck. So loadmaster hopped on the airplane, we closed it up, taxied out, took off. Now, one of the smartest things I did was soon after we got airborne, I told the radio operator, I said, get the squadron on the horn. So he calls up the squadron, Colonel Omi. And I said, Colonel Omi, I said, this is King 3-4 or whoever we were. I said, we're en route from Utapao back to Korat, and we do not have the Charlie man on board. Now, the way they lettered, identified us was they'd use our call sign like King 3-4, and the Alpha man was the aircraft commander, the Bravo man was the co-pilot, Charlie man was the navigator, and so forth. So I said, I briefed at 1 o'clock departure. It was 1 o'clock. He failed to show up, sir, and I've got to have this airplane back at whatever for another mission. He said, don't worry about it, Bob. So we come smoking back to Korat and land, and I hand it over to another crew for another training mission, I suppose. Anyway, we head back over to the bar, and Colonel Omey's sitting there, and he's kind of chuckling. And I sit down, I said, sir, I said, I hope I'm not in too much trouble for leaving him behind. He said, no, I thought it was great. He said, he called about 10 minutes after you called and wanted me to have you turn around and go back and get him. I said, okay. He says, I told him to take the bus. So he ended up taking the bus from Utapao to Bangkok, and then the next day, since they only had one bus up country, he had to wait overnight in Bangkok, which really wasn't too bad, but anyway, and then bring the bus back to Korat. And he only had was his flight suit. No toiletries as far as I know. At any rate, he comes rolling back into Korat the next day, and he hunts me down, and he said, I don't appreciate you leaving me behind. And I said, I don't appreciate you being late. Your turn. Well, I can tell you this, with my experience with him for the rest of the year, he was never late to another report time that I had going for me. And I think I don't think he was ever late for one of Alan's either. But that wasn't the end of Buck. We had a trip back to the States once where we had to bring an airplane back for depot level maintenance. So they ran some kind of lottery to pick the crew, and wouldn't you know it, I drew Buck as the navigator. Well, the flight went from Korat to Philippines, from the Philippines to Guam. I think we stayed overnight in Guam. The next day went from Guam to Hawaii, and then went from Hawaii into McClellan, California. The leg from Hawaii to McClellan was at night. So anyway, we're up there. I can't remember how long of a flight it was, but anyway, so we're up there just kind of droning along about midnight, 2, 3 in the morning. I don't know what it was. And Buck says, sir, he says, I think we need to call and declare minimum nav aids. Oh, that's not what you want to hear. So I said, why is that? And he said, well, I'm not quite sure where we are. I said, well, you're the navigator, aren't you? He said, yes, sir, but he says, things just aren't adding up. I said, all right. So I told the co-pilot, I said, okay, you got the aircraft. I'm going to go back and see what Buck's doing. So I went back, and he takes these star shots, okay, using a sextant, and then they triangulate, and then they go into this book, and they take these numbers, and that gives us our position. Usually pretty simple. So I said, okay, walk me through it just so I can cross-check your work. So he did. Showed me the readings from the sextant and so forth, and he said, okay, now we got all this. All we do is go into this manual here, and it will tell us where we are. I said, okay, great. So he's in the manual. He comes down, chasing through it, and he says, okay, it says we should be here, but I don't think that's right. So I said, Buck, does it make a difference in that manual if you're using the month of March, or should we use the month of April that we're in? He just turned and looked up at me. So he chases through the April month, and Lord and behold, we're only about 2 miles off course. Not a big deal, so we just correct over. We're on our way. Later ran into him years later at Randolph. He was there for some reason or another. I don't know him. Might have been on the IG team or what. And we stood and chat. He didn't seem to harbor any hard feelings. I didn't remind him of it either. But anyway, just one of the stories that came out of Korat. Good to see everybody. Enjoy the day.